camera while we're talking, or look at me, whatever you want.
Yeah, okay.
Good morning, everybody. Hi, it's Natalie from Creative Makers, and I'm so happy you're here. Really, it makes me so happy to see you guys jump on and jump off and talk to each other in the group. It warms my heart. This morning, we are with Kathy Gallegos. And Kathy is it right to call you the owner?
I'm the director, the founder and the director.
The founder and the director of Hello First Person, the founder and the director of Avenue 50 Studio. Sometimes when I start these interviews, I have a hard time talking. Anyway, and we're here in the studio today, and we've got somebody's work up behind us. I can't remember her name.
Annie Marini Jensen.
Annie Marini Jensen. Okay, I'll ask you questions about that later. Anyway, so we're here in the studio, and we're going to have a conversation with Kathy about her and what she does here. Hi.
Hi. Welcome to the gallery.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me come over and do this.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm really honored that you thought of me.
Oh, I've been thinking of you the whole time, but you've been resistant.
Sounds like me, yeah.
But not in a bad way. Just, slightly evasive.
It would be slightly intimidated.
I know. This isn't always easy. Oh, I forgot. I'm going to have this with me because this makes it easier for me to answer questions sometimes when it's working. Oh, there we go. Okay, good. All right. So, first question and the only question I ever ask people. Tell me about what your creative life looked like as a kid.
That was a really important question to me because nobody's ever asked me.
I figure. I think a lot of artists get that.
A lot of artists get it.
Yeah, I know. I think they don't get that question.
When I talk to artists, I tried to find out a little bit more about them.
Yeah.
So it's never been about, as a child, I did this and that. But it turns out that when I was thinking about it and I was talking to my sisters, we actually come from a family that played music a lot. And that I play the guitar now. And so it turns out that my grandfather and uncle on my mother's side from Puerto Rico, they used to play the guitar and sing. So what she told me is that they used to play in the bars at night.
Yeah.
And then Sunday mornings they play in the churches, right?
Yeah.
And because, they had to...
Wherever you could.
Wherever you could and wherever you could make some money. So when I first picked up the guitar, I sat with my mother, and one time she goes, "Oh, it reminds me of my brother," and she was being nice to me. I had just learned, it was probably pretty bad, but moms are good like that. They want to encourage you, right?
But this was fairly recently that she told you this, right? Because
No.
you haven't been playing the guitar that long.
No, well, what happened is that I was given a guitar when I was about 20.
Oh, so this is from when you were 20? That your mom made this comment?
Yeah, and it was my first guitar class. I'm going, thank you, Mom. But in New York, in the 6th grade, well, maybe I should go back a little further.
Yeah.
On my father's side, he's Cuban.
Yeah.
So his family they were wealthier, and they were able to get music lessons, and so his brother became a pianist in Havana. So he performed as a pianist. So when my father came to the U.S., he loved classical music, and he bought one of the first record players and became, signed up to different clubs on classical music collectors, and he would buy Tchaikovsky's LPs, all his concerts, Rimsky-Korsakov. One of my favorites as a child was Peter and the Wolf.
I love that you know so much about this. Is a whole different aspect.
So I did grow up listening to classical music. So my older sister, when she graduated elementary school, PS 107 in Queens, before you go into the junior high, they give you a music test to see if you're gifted. So she passed,
Oh, that's interesting.
and they ask you what, you want a wind instrument, you want a string instrument. So
Right.
she said, I want string, and they gave her the guitar. Well, I'm sorry, they gave her the violin. So she would come home and practice. So I'd listen to her. And, what does a child know about whether she's good or bad? She's just practicing,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So here's my father constantly playing classical, and here's my sister learning the violin. And then it was my turn to graduate, and they did the same thing and gave us the whole sixth grade a music test.
Yeah.
And so I passed
Oh, good.
because I listened to
I was
classical.
afraid you were going to tell me that you didn't pass.
No, I passed because I'm listening to the classical music all the time, and my sister was playing the violin. And so they asked me what did I want to play, and I said the saxophone, and they gave me the flute. I said, but that's
Oh.
such a high-pitched instrument. I hated those high-pitched
Why did
soprano voices.
Why did they give you the flute instead of the sax?
It's not a girl's instrument to play.
Oh, it was that time.
Yes, it was during those times. No, girls do not play the saxophone. They play the flute. But I was never a soprano. I always kind of liked the darker tones.
The alto.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the minor key.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just kind of wasn't my instrument. But anyway, so we moved from New York here, but they didn't do that in Los Angeles. They don't give the whole sixth grade to find out who's musically inclined and then put them in music classes, help to steer them in a particular direction.
Did they do also other tests? Like, did they give art tests to see if you were artistically?
No.
Only music.
Only music.
No math tests, no reading.
Oh, well, I'm sure they did that too.
But they don't care. I mean, if you're gifted, you're going to end up in an accelerated class anyway.
They'll know by,
everything else.
Right. And then it turns out that my mother's first husband was a flamenco dancer. And she came from Puerto Rico, and she was my mother. She was actually, her sister was living here in the Bronx, and said, I have somebody who wants to marry you. And so she said, great. And he paid her fare to the United States. She got here. She took one look at him. She says, oh no, I'm not getting married. And so what happened is they kicked her out, and so she went to stay at this girls' Catholic hotel, Catholic residence, and she became a waitress at a club because her life was about music. So it makes sense to go into a club.
Right.
And so that's where she met her first husband, and he was a flamenco dancer. And sure enough, my oldest sister, went into dance and then went into salsa. So there was always that music that we listened to also. Mm-hmm. And she was always dancing, and she would take us by our hand and try to teach us the steps and the rhythms and all of that. And when she was in New York, she actually danced with the accompanying band. It was the Tito Puente band.
Oh, wow.
I said, I have a photograph of when Tito Puente actually had black hair, And
that was a long time ago.
long time ago, And so she always wanted to sing and dance and be on stage. So that also influenced us.
It's so interesting to me because I love the way people's parents really do influence their kids' lives in terms of like music and art and what they tend to do later in life. I mean, it's very rare that you see somebody do like a complete opposite thing than what their family is already moving towards.
Right. And, my father was a very creative man. He was the youngest of like 9. And in Cuba, they made their own toys. Mm-hmm. And so he would make his own toys. And plus being, kind of the upper middle class, his father was a librarian. And so they always had libraries in their house with books. And so in our house, my father always had a whole wall of books. And he also collected stamps. Like back then, there was no television or radio.
Right.
So people had to figure out and, entertain themselves. So his father was a stamp collector. He became a stamp collector. And he taught us to look at stamps and told us that those stamps are actually little tiny paintings. And you could learn about world art through looking at stamps. So he was this great stamp collector and always gave each one of us bags full of stamps. And we would just open them and look at them. And it was amazing.
So okay, because I'm like, how did you get into art? But now I'm seeing this little piece, this little seed.
That's right. So he taught us to look at stamps as art. But he also went out and bought paint by numbers when it was oil paints.
Mm.
And so he made, like he would get all these beautiful scenes, and we painted paint by numbers. And I remember the smell.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very creative. He bought a train set for my brother and built the whole landscape around this train with paper bags as the mountains and a mirror as a lake.
Your dad sounds like quite a guy.
He was really creative,
Yeah.
and we never really looked at him that way. That
Right,
was
you
just
never
my
thought
dad.
about it, exactly.
Yeah, and he would buy us picture puzzles because they were paintings. And back then they didn't have these photographs. It was all paintings. And I remember I really liked Thomas Benton Hart. He's a landscape painter.
Yeah, I don't know his work.
And because it was kind of animation-like, from remembering the right artist. But we learned about art through those things.
But did you ever spend any time making your own art?
Well, when I was little, we used to sit down with a Sears catalog that would come in the mail, and I would cut out the women with their beauty, showing off their clothes, and the men showing off their clothes, and the kids, and I would just cut them out of the catalog and create families and stories. Go up to my room and spread them out on the floor and just create little stories of families and people.
Shuffle them around.
Yeah. And these are the aunts and uncles, and these are the visitors, these are the neighbors, and they're coming to visit, that kind of thing.
That's wild.
Well, because it was a fun thing to do. And he also had like a little tool, workshop down in the basement, and had all these little like L bars. What do they call them?
I don't know what
that
they
you put
are.
in the wall to hold a shelf or something.
Oh yeah, okay.
And different things. And we used to take those little L-shaped things, L bars. They were metal.
Yeah.
And we used to make them into houses. You put two of them together, and it was
a square.
It was a square.
Yeah.
And so we would add squares. We would open them up a little, and there's the door, and then we would like an overview of of the interior of a house. Well, that explains why in high school, when the counselor called me and he said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to be an interior designer.
Oh, interesting.
Because I was already creating those.
This has taken a whole new turn that I had no idea it was going to go down. I did not foresee this coming.
Yeah, so my sister, Amy, my oldest sister, who was a salsa dancer, she also got into the School of Art in New York, and she wanted to be a fashion designer.
Oh, I can relate to that.
So she used to have her sketchbooks there and her portfolio, and we used to look at all of that. Mm-hmm. So in middle school, I took homemaking. Mm-hmm. So they had this thing called homemaking business. So my father was always, know your business. And he taught us how to do our own taxes and how to write checks and how to open a bank account. And he always taught us the business side. And he says, you have to know business. You can't just go out in the world without knowing how to write a check or how to save money.
Right.
So I took homemaking business to try to, sew my own clothes and design some of them too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was out at Pacoima Junior High. It was a very wonderful school at Pacoima. And so because of the music and because of my family, I took Glee Club. I was always in the Glee Club at school. I had a horrible voice, but I loved singing. the people around me were going, "Oh, Kathy, can you lower
Were they
your
really, or is
voice?"
this just
No.
what you imagined?
No, no, Marilyn, right there standing in front of me. Oh, I just looked at her. You know,
Find Marilyn on the internet now.
I
Send her a little voice message.
yeah. So there, I'm in music now. I can do music. Anyway,
So did you end up going to interior design school?
no, the counselor said to me, your grades aren't high enough. You need to become a secretary. You're good at business.
Oh my God.
He totally discouraged me.
This is killing me.
I mean, that happens in schools with women, first of all.
I know. Well, yes. I think hopefully less now.
Hopefully less now. We've got more sensitive counselors. So he said, no, that's not for you. Well, he's not the person who should be telling me what I want in my life. So when I graduated and worked out in the working world and completely hated it. Completely hated it.
Did you just take some sort of menial job? And
I was a receptionist at an insurance company, and that was when they had the old PBS switchboards. So the thing would be ringing, and I would take that little plug, and I go, the baby's crying, and I'd put it in its mouth, to stop the crying.
Oh my God, is that how you started to think about it?
Yeah, that was the way I was thinking. All these babies are crying. Put this thing in, hated that job. That wasn't for me. And fortunately, right around that time, this is when like Woodstock and the hippie movement, we were kind of going more into art.
Yeah.
And so
there was like an awakening.
It was awakening.
Yeah.
And so that really helped me to understand who I am, who I was and what I was meant to be.
So how did you get here? How did you get to the place where, art is your thing now?
Because I always took art. I know that I had to work in the working world, but even when I was pregnant, I remember with my second son, I was like this big, and I was going to not a continuation. What is it called? It's when you take classes outside, extension classes or something.
Not like extra.
Yeah, extracurriculum classes or something. But you could get them at the community college, or you could get them, or they have them in high schools.
The ones that are like no credit necessarily, right?
No credit. You just want to
take them because you're enriching, like enrichment classes.
Enrichment classes,
yeah,
right?
That's it.
So I was taking figure drawing. I remember my stomach was huge like this. And this is the funny thing. This was like I don't know, it's middle school, elementary school in Glendale.
Mm-hmm.
And here were the windows to the class, and we're drawing, and all of a sudden you see a ball flying through the air in the window.
Oh, because of the kids.
No, out there, it was a juggling class.
Oh my God.
And they were juggling a pinball, or not a pinball.
Yeah, bowling ball pin.
Yeah, bowling ball pin. You see the thing go up, and then this ball go up. It was very entertaining to sit in that class and to watch these things go up.
Was it a figure drawing class where there were naked people? Or were they clothed?
I don't even remember, but I think it was naked because it was for adults.
Yeah, it would be such a crack up. Here's naked people, there's bowling pins,
It's a crack up. It was. It made the class more entertaining. Now, the teacher wasn't very good, but I was able to draw. So I was always drawing. And then, I had to work, and I had 2 kids, and it's very, very hard. And so I found a flyer that said free watercolor class at Self-Help Graphics in East LA.
Mm-hmm. And now we're coming back to Self-Help Graphics, because Self-Help Graphics has come up so many times in these interviews, I have to tell you.
They were really powerful and influential. And I went, and the teacher was Irena Cervantes. Mm-hmm. She was extremely encouraging and challenged us. And so I started feeling comfortable in painting through Irena. And watercolor is a very difficult medium, very cranky.
It's not
doesn't
one
like
that
to
I
be-
gravitate towards ever.
No, because it doesn't like to be pushed around. It says, no,
No.
I'm staying right here.
Right. It's like you better mean it.
You better mean it.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I
Yeah.
don't push you around because you're going to turn into mud. And so, where oil painting is very...
Right. You put it down, you don't like it, you can wipe it off, you can move it, you can push it, you can, yeah, that's why I like it.
So, I started, but going back to the oil paints, remember I said the oil
Yeah.
paint when I was younger, I loved the smell.
Yeah.
So I was going to LACC and I would intentionally walk through the art corridors in the basement, I think, 2 floors or something, and you could smell the oil paint and the linseed oil.
Mm-hmm.
Loved walking through that hall. So I did take some classes at LACC, art classes, photography, drawing. That's as far as I got there. But I spent most of my time at LACC as a music major. Because when I was 20, I got the guitar.
Mm-hmm.
I got a guitar. Someone sold me a guitar. And I found a classical music, the only musical class they offered for enrichment.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really want to do classical. I mean, I just wanted to play, strum,
Right,
because we're
something.
talking about the hippie period,
Right.
where everybody was singing to...
Right. Group sing-alongs, kumbaya moments.
Yes.
Yes, the whole deal.
So I just wanted to do that, but no, I had to go into the deep end because they didn't offer anything else. And it was difficult from the beginning, but I loved it.
See, now, I didn't know that you've been doing music just about all your life. I mean, let's face it.
Mm-hmm.
You make it always sound like you just started last year.
Yeah, well, that's the way I sound, okay? But
no, I mean, I don't get to hear you play because you don't really play.
I will not play for anyone.
No, but I mean, you do make it sound like I just started and it's, I'm just figuring it out.
Mm. Well, it's it was beautiful because at LACC, that was one of the best schools for music, and I didn't know that. I just took it because I loved it.
Yeah.
I took piano, and that's when I first started picking up guitar, and it was only for about a year. Wow. My mother was like, "Oh, it reminds me of my brother Ramon," and it's like, "Oh, so good."
So you're taking all these art classes though at the same time too. I mean, I know that art was on your radar as a kid because your dad kept presenting it to you, but I mean, you didn't talk about, I was gravitating, I was trying to paint these things or anything like that. And I get the feeling that it didn't take any bandwidth in your head, or very little. I mean, you were just like, yes, it's there, it's beautiful, I know the work, but I mean, some artists would be like, oh, I got to copy that, or I got to figure out how they did that, or whatever. But that wasn't what was going on, right?
Yeah, I don't quite understand what you're saying. I'm sorry.
I'm just saying that, I mean, here you are taking these art classes as an adult.
Yes.
But I didn't hear you say that you were curious about it as a kid.
No, because it was always there. It was always there. So we always did it. We always drew, and my father was always encouraging that. And all of us took art classes.
But it didn't seem special to you because it was just always there, right?
Right. It was always just, always there.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just kind of gravitated towards it. So I felt comfortable in drawing classes.
Okay.
And I felt,
all right,
this is where I have some strength because, my goodness, my sisters were so smart. And they were so smart in everything. And I couldn't succeed. I couldn't compete with them. So the only way that I felt that I can shine was through the arts.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I kind of, and I saw that it was easy for me. In 5th and 6th grade, the teacher made me the class artist. So I did all of the stuff in the class, and he really tried to encourage me in the arts, and that's why when I went to junior high.
All right, this was the piece I was missing, but thank you for filling it in for me now, because I was just like, that's why I was like, I didn't understand the jump, but now I get it more.
Yeah, okay. I just always did it. But
yeah.
If we had stayed in New York, I probably would have gone into music.
Right.
Because that's where they were.
Right. They were pushing
pointing
me
in that direction, and my sister would have stayed with violin, and we'd have been much more a musical family.
It would have been a whole different thing.
A whole different life. But we came here, and in 7th grade, I took for my electives Glee Club and drawing.
Yeah.
Drawing 1.
Yeah.
Or 1 or whatever it was in Thomas Starr King Junior High. And teacher was really good. She was really good. But when but because my father was like, you got to take care of business.
Right.
You got to earn a living. That
Right.
was always just. But even when I was, like I said, when I was pregnant, I was still doing art in
Right.
different ways, like sewing for my kids.
Yeah.
Sewing things to put
You
on the
really
wall.
are an artist that can't stick to one medium. You just had lots of stuff.
Lots of stuff. But what I enjoyed the most, I guess, is the music end of it.
Right. No,
So,
I totally understand now better. But what put you on the path to being a director?
So I was at Self-Help, and I was taking all of these classes at Self-Help,
Yeah.
and I went to Glendale City College and did printmaking. I learned printmaking there, and I started doing printmaking for years at Self-Help. Etchings, dry points, aqua tints, all of that. So I used to come home smelling like a mechanic, an auto mechanic,
Yeah.
because you had to deal with gasolines and acids and tar, the asphaltum you put on the plates, and you had to chisel the thing down. It was a whole lifestyle there.
Right. It's a really physical sort of work.
So Irene Cervantes invited me with a group of other artists, Barbara Carrasco, Francisco Letelier, poets like Gloria Alvarez, to go to join up with a tour from UCLA to go to Nicaragua and support the revolution.
Oh, wow.
So we went, there were about 20 of us, artists, poets, and musicians, and our job was to paint a mural. So we were always, they were always at Self-Help designing the mural, and I was a new artist to them at the time, and so I never really had input in the mural itself, and I was feeling bad, and they said, well, why don't you do the area where the credits are going to be? I said, okay. So I drew a little boy, because I had 2 boys. I drew a little boy, and then all the credits were going to be on top of him. And so when we, or above him, and so when we went to Managua to paint this mural, I worked on the rest of the mural. I really learned a lot about mural painting, and it's a different perspective. You have to know what you're painting, because you're,
right. You're up close. You're like this close to it,
and it could look very abstract, and you have to understand that the size of a hand sometimes is not the size of your face. You have to make it larger to make it look like it's part of the body.
Yeah.
Different perspectives. Anyway, I was learning all of that, and I was drawing the little boy. Wasn't, it was pretty much ground level. So he was, the height of like a 9-year-old. And this sweet little boy came over, and he just wanted to hang with me.
While you were doing it,
I was doing my art, and he would just stay right by my side, and he didn't have any shoes or anything, and he just loved me, just attached to my personality. And there were others with the other artists, and so I said, well, let me draw him. I'll draw him on there. And the figure drawing really helped me. I got his legs and feet just right. And then his father came over and said, would you put this little logo on his T-shirt? It's the children's group here.
Oh,
the
cool.
children, we have a little organization for the kids. I said, I would love to. And I put the little thing on his chest, and then he was carrying a little Nicaragua flag. And I was so proud of my little contribution there, and all of the names above it and all of that. Years later, and I can't remember his first name, his last name was Kunzel. He was a professor at UCLA in art history, and he was going around Nicaragua taking pictures of all the murals that came about because of the revolution. And so he came upon our mural and took the painting, a photograph of our mural. Well, it turned out that some of the people right wing came up and
Ruined
threw
it.
white paint on the little boy of all
So on your aspect.
on my part. And I said, what is a little boy? And but the neighbors raised money to get an artist to paint that little boy, bring him back. I was so honored.
That's pretty amazing.
I was so honored because they loved that little boy, because it was the Chicano community supports the Nicaraguan community. So it was a lot about Chicano history and indigenous history, but I had actually used the people themselves, brought the people into the mural, the people in this neighborhood.
Right, that community was now involved.
And that was their mural because they're children.
Yeah.
And that little boy symbolized the kids in that whole neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I came back and I just, got closer and closer to self-help, and then went off to Honduras for a year. And when I came back, Sister Karen was starting to get sick, and she eventually passed away, and Tomas Benitez took over, and we started talking about art spaces for Chicano Latino artists, and how there were very few and very rare, and that all we could think of was self-help graphics.
Right, that was all you heard about here. Now, what year was this?
That was like around 97.
97?
97, yeah. When I got back, 96, 97. And then, so there was, in Lincoln Heights, have you heard of the Aztlan Cultural Arts Center?
Mm-mm. I mean, I think there's a little tinkle here in my head, but I've never been there.
It's at the old city jail. So where you live, you should know the old city jail.
I do know the old city jail.
They used to do a lot of movies in there.
Yeah, but there hasn't been anything in there in a long time.
They kicked everybody out. They used to have a beautiful gym upstairs for the kids in the neighborhood, where the kids can get off the streets. And anyway, they kicked them out, and then the Bilingual Foundation for the Arts was in the newer wing of the old city jail, and they kicked them out. And they eventually kicked out Aztlan Cultural Arts Center, and I worked I worked with them teaching photography for about a year, and I set up a little store so that the artists in that collective could put their art in there, and we could sell some art and bring in some money. That was the seed right there.
What a beautiful store. What a beautiful transition, when you're a teacher and you want people to celebrate your artists, and to set up a space for them to actually have their art available to show people and to sell, I would imagine.
And to sell. And so we started, they started doing art openings. And then the little store would be open because people were selling their art there.
Right. So this is what prompted everything. I saw a question come up. I want to see. Hold on. Oh, I got to turn this down. You guys want to listen to us? Let me see. I saw something. So David Kunzel was the art history professor.
David, thank you. Yes, David Kunzel.
Of course he knows. Yes. Of course he does.
Yeah.
Okay. So this was the seed. So.
Right. And then they eventually closed Aztlan, and I was asked to be in a show at Self-Help for Photographers because I did darkroom work, and I needed a darkroom space to do the work. Interestingly enough, while I was in Honduras, somebody gave me an enlarger. And so there I was trying to, print my own photographs in Tegucigalpa. So I brought back all that equipment with me, and I had this equipment. That's why I set it up at Aztlan, but then Aztlan closed, and so I was invited to be in a photography show at Self-Help, and I needed a studio. I didn't have a studio space. So we found this space. And the office that I sit in now was my darkroom. And so I had it set up beautifully. It's a perfectly dark room.
Yeah, no, it's perfect because there's no windows in
There's
it.
no windows, and the door was fireproofed, so it didn't have any leakage anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I set it up in there, and but every time I came out, this huge white room was looking at me, and I said, "Wow, this place looks like a gallery."
This is a lot of space too, this building. Did you have this whole space?
No,
Okay.
we had only that one side, and one door in, one door out, and the front windows only. And in the summer, this place would go up over 100 because there was no way for the sun to go, the air to get any kind of cross ventilation.
Mm-hmm.
And the sun beats across the way from about 1 o'clock to about when it sets. And in the summer, that could be 8 o'clock.
Yeah, it's harsh.
So we finally moved into this side, and we opened up the archway, and it just totally lowered the temperature in this building. But for many years, we just had the one space, and we started to outgrow it. So in the very beginning, I couldn't afford the place and have rent. It was like $600. That was a lot of money.
Yeah.
So we decided, well, let's have, I'm going to have a rent party and bring the artists in, and we're going to try to sell some art so I can make some money. And we started selling immediately. And so other artists started stepping forward and saying, can I show, can I show, can I show? And so that's how it started. And we actually had some really wonderful shows in the very beginning.
I bet.
That were never documented. And it was just, we don't even have cards, we have nothing on it, you know?
Right, they just happened.
They just happened. And I was introduced to so many artists, and pretty soon, you know, we sold so much in this one show that I couldn't keep up with all the sales and be fair to the artists. And so Margaret Garcia said to me, you need to open up a business account, and you have to get a business license. I said, I don't know how to do all of that. She took me by the hand, brought me out to Downey, where they have the city service centers, the building there, and taught me that I had to have a fictitious business name.
Yeah, DBA.
A DBA taught me that I had to have a business license, and taught me that I had to have a separate bank account for my own, because it could get no commingling here. And so that was the start. And from there, pretty soon, my dark room started getting stuffed with all kinds of, you know, with paint for the painting the walls, and with chairs, and, you know, and it just started that way. We had
so dark room out, gallery in.
Gallery in.
Wow.
And so that was the start of all of that. And like I said, in the very beginning, it took off, and we just served a need, and that's what it was. We served a need.
Right.
And if you serve a need,
the community's hungry.
Yeah,
they're hungry to see themselves represented and to have beauty. You know,
people would say to me, "Why are you here? This is not where a gallery should be." And I said, "This is exactly where I should be. This is my community. I'm not going to open up in the West Side. I'm not a gallery person. I'm actually an artist who opened up a gallery."
Right.
And, you know, trying to help other artists, because we need a space where community artists can show, where Latino artists can show.
Yeah.
And then eventually other galleries started opening up. And so we now have a number of galleries that represent Chicano art.
Absolutely. So. Now, I know that, so when you started, you were just a regular business, but now you're a nonprofit, right?
So a year into it, someone said, well, you know, you should be a nonprofit, because it's very hard to make money in the arts, and you're helping the community.
Right.
You're not here to make money. You're just actually here to help the community.
Right. And to exist. So, I mean, make enough money to survive, obviously.
Right. And that we were also doing lectures and musical events. And they said, you're doing everything that a nonprofit gallery would do, or a nonprofit art space would do. So it turns out that before us, there was really no nonprofit that was only a gallery. There was a nonprofit and attached to museums, and they had the museum was a nonprofit, and then they would have a bookstore, but there was nothing that was really a nonprofit gallery, only a gallery, not a bookstore in a gallery or a print shop in a gallery, just a straight up gallery. So it was kind of a new concept, trying to sell art, and that's all we want to do. We want to try to help the artist. We give the artist, the majority of the money because we're trying to help them, and then we have artist discussions, and then we can get grants, and we could do stuff in the community.
Right.
So
you can make it bigger.
We could make it bigger.
Bigger than just an art space where you can come buy a piece of art.
Right, where you come by and somebody, a poet approached me and said, can we start doing poetry readings here? And then he named it La Palabra Poetry. And we started having monthly poetry readings here. So we didn't have any funds for that. We just let the poets come and read. And so it was a lot about just community, just developing a space for artists. So
I mean, I know you've used this space in lots of different ways. I mean, I've personally seen, I know that sometimes when there's traveling artists that you've let them use parts of the space as their own studio. I know that you've rented small portions out for that, for either local artists or, again, people traveling through. I've seen big events here. I've seen classes, photography. I know you've done music stuff here. I mean, it all serves.
It does, and I really believe that, like, the arts are history. We're documenting our times, and we're creating our art history here. And so that's why I think art needs to be nonprofit, and it needs to be funded, by the government, because we're actually the voice of what's going on in our times.
Yeah.
If we look back at some art history books, they're telling us.
Right, they're documenting history as it's happening. Absolutely.
Look at even, somebody as recent as like Andy Warhol, and I know he's not that recent, but I mean, he documented his time.
Well, I just think about all the artists too that have popped out of this period of the pandemic, and all their work that's been documented, documenting what we've been going through. It's pretty. It's pretty large,
and
it's going to be,
and it's going to be significant. And there were times when we would take pictures of artists and they'd take their mask off, and we would say, wait a minute, if we have a couple of pictures with you wearing your mask, it'll absolutely place us in time.
Right. Exactly. Exactly, because when I see pictures of anybody with a mask on, I know exactly what the time period is.
Right.
Exactly. All right, so now I'm going to ask you I need to know about some technical stuff, because I know people in this group are going to want to know. As a director, and when you're setting up your shows, what are you looking for in terms of like people that get to come in here and have their work represented? Because I know, just because I know you and I'm part of this community, that generally shows change out every 30 to 45 days, depending on what's happening. And all the work comes down, and then all new work gets put up, and it varies. How do you make choices as to whose work is going to be here and what you're looking for?
All galleries are the personal taste of the director. That's first of all.
Yes.
And if a gallery says, no, I don't think it works here, it doesn't mean your work is bad.
Right.
It just means that we don't think it fits here.
Right. No, I completely understand that. Yeah.
So if a person comes and says, look, this is the kind of artwork I do, I can tell you whether it should be shown here in this community, in this gallery space. But basically, I tried to find artists who actually have a narrative and have something to say. I mean, I love beautiful landscapes, I do.
Right.
But I kind of gravitate more towards having something to say, and also I'm a progressive person. You could tell by the countries that I visited. So I'm progressive. So the content is important because we're, like I said, we're documenting our history. So I need to see something that is not just a painted nude,
Right.
because that doesn't tell me anything. You know,
Right. You want
it's
the
beautiful.
story. You want a story that goes with it and that somehow relates to here.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
figures are beautiful, and everybody, I think, needs to take figure drawing.
Yeah.
But if you're just going to show me, you know, a beautifully painted nude, what's the content behind that? Why are you doing that? And,
Right.
you know, and so the why is very important to me.
Well, I would think so too. I mean, this completely makes sense because of the community we're in. You know, it would be hard, I think, to show a bunch of works that weren't related to the community somehow. How would that be involving the community?
And each community brings in, you know, when funders ask us, well, who is your community? Who do you speak to? I'm going, well, it all depends on the show.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes, you know, like we just had a Filipino documentary show about Marcos.
Yeah.
And martial law, and we must have had at least 250 people in the course of the month coming through to see that show. So that's they besides coming through, they looked at all the work.
Yeah.
So we like to mix and match so people learn, and that's part of our mission. You know, create bridges of understanding through the arts, so that you come in and you learn about other cultures and what they're concerned about. So we like documentary shows like Marcos martial law show, because it educates us through in a visual way rather than a written way. And many of us are better with our eyes than reading, you know. And I read also. I read books. I love magazines. But I learn better when I look.
Yeah. Reading can be tedious. Yeah. I mean, and then you're subject to other people's words. And they don't always sit. You know what I mean? They don't always speak the way you speak, so they don't sit the same way.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Do you book far out? I mean, I'm asking you questions that I really don't know. I mean, do you have like a whole calendar and you're already booked out for the year, let's say, or?
We're already booked out for the year.
Oh, good for you.
And
that's awesome.
I try not to book too far in the future, because I like to keep things fresh.
Yeah, things happen.
And things happen. We had some wonderful shows when Trump was president.
Yeah.
And we had to move fast on those shows.
Yeah.
Right? And make it very current.
Yeah, you had to make space for them.
We had to make space for them. So, or just new artists, like you said, coming from someplace else, and they're only going to be here for a brief period of time. We try to make space for them.
Yeah.
So.
You know what I was just thinking about, I mean, because I don't fit the profile of this space, because I mean, this is mostly Latin community. I'm not Latin. I don't have that kind of story in my background, so to speak. But one of the things I love that you have is that you work with the local art group, Arroyo Arts Collective. And there's a collective here that has a wall dedicated to themselves. And in order to participate in the show, you pay a small fee, and then your art stays up for a month. And so you become part of this community,
right,
and part of this conversation, which I think is really a wonderful way to include everybody.
So when we first opened, we were geared towards the Latino Chicano community.
Yeah.
We were a Latino Chicano gallery. And then local artists started coming in.
Right.
And I said, well, you know, we're Latino Chicano gallery. And they say, yeah, but I'm local and I don't get representation either. Nobody wants to look at my work. I go, well, that's interesting. Yeah. So, okay. Let me look at the work and let me see. And there were some fabulous artists.
Yeah. How
do you say no to fabulous artists, right?
Exactly.
So we started saying, well, we got to do something. Let's make it, let's try to be, multicultural with an emphasis on Latinos, but try to make it multicultural. And of course, the Arroyo Arts Collective. I was a member when I was at the Aztlán Cultural Arts Center. So I already knew about the collective.
Yeah.
And so when I came here, we talked. we talked a lot, and they wanted to put shows together, and in the very early years, they used to have a space here called the Acorn Gallery.
Oh, really? I didn't know
That was before 2008. It was in the red floor room right here.
Okay.
And what happened is that the ownership of the building changed hands, and he doubled the rent. So I said, okay, I've got to put my nose to the grindstone now and really hunt down money, grant money to keep these doors open. The collective said, we can't afford the double rent.
Right.
We can't afford it. We're going to have to go. And, I would bump into some people who sat on the board, and they go, I'm really sorry we had to leave. I'm so sorry I think they were suffering more than I was suffering that they had to leave. So that's why I think we came about with the blue wall room. And, we said, look, how do we make it work for the collective members? Because they need a place to show. It's
Right.
not just this nebulous collective in the air, but they have to have a place to show. And there's some wonderful artists. Annie is part of the collective.
Mm-hmm.
So, it worked out really well. We try to coordinate the shows with the artists.
Yeah.
And make sure that they have an opening when everybody is having an opening.
Well, plus it's such a good thing too, because, as part of the collective, especially if you don't have a say in who's going to be showing in that room, the fact that there's a small payment that you get no matter what happens, whether they sell their work or not, because if you don't have control over what their work looks, what work is going to go in there, you obviously can't determine, well, I think this will sell, this won't sell, whatever, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so it would leave you high and dry if people just came in and out of that room without some sort of foundation of cash to keep you going.
Oh, you brought up another point about whether a piece of art can sell.
Yeah.
So if a person's going to have a one-person show and shows me a bunch of work, what I usually tell them is that I can sell this and this and this for you, but I cannot sell that one.
Mm-hmm. So
right away what I can help, because if I am really generating towards a particular piece of art, I will definitely, take visitors by the hand and pull them and show them this beautiful piece that I love and tell them that this is the one that I love.
Yeah.
And so I try to help the artists gain a collector.
Right.
But also,
well, in a sense, you're their champion.
But I have to like the work. I have to generate towards it, because like we said in the beginning, I'm here with the art every day. I can help sell it for you, but if I don't connect, I can't sell it.
Right.
It's not right for this gallery because I can't help you here. And also with price, I think artists have to, we deal with so many new artists.
This was a conversation we were having before we jumped in here in regard to price, and I knew that it would be something we should be revisiting while you can watch this.
Yeah, it's you can tell kind of a new artist and how they price.
I was going to say, I'll tell you what I always say, and you tell me what you always say.
Well, let's say somebody comes in and with a piece of art, and I've never worked with them before, and say, well, how much do you want to sell that piece for? And they say, well, $7,000. Well, first of all, I'm going to say, we don't have that kind of collector base for you, and we're not the right gallery if you're going to sell it.
Right, because you know your clientele, you know your community.
It's not going to work here. It's not going to fly. Sorry. But also I ask, so why did you price it at that price point? And the usual response is, because I think it's worth it. And it is worth it. But given the current, given the state of the economy and the support of collectors and all that, it's just not going to fly, especially here. And so the question is, do you have collectors? Are you in the art magazines? Are you in art history books? newspaper articles? Do you have a large collector base? What is the basis for that price? And if you're not known, maybe your family might buy a piece at $7,000 if they've
Right.
got spendable income, but maybe a good friend will do it. But you're not going to sell very often, and you're going to start collecting a lot of work. You have to start small, pay your dues, and every so often raise the price.
Yeah, move up the scale.
Incrementally.
Yes.
Not because, let's say the other hand, you just sold that piece to someone you didn't know, which is a great thing.
Yeah.
For $7,000. So now what's the rest of your work going to be worth?
Right.
At that same size? And if you sell another piece that's equal the same size and subject matter, you always have to sell it at $7,000, because if you put it lower than that, it's going to look like you can't sell.
And it's also going to aggravate your collector.
And it'll aggravate the collector, because then he's going to think you overcharged me, so you can't go lower.
Right.
So you just put your own value on your own work at whatever, 7,000, 5,000. Right. And so now you're going to have fewer buyers if you keep your value steady. If you keep going this way and that way and pricing it in all different directions, then nobody will understand the value of your work. You have to know that this is usually, my larger works are this much money usually, right. my works on paper are this much. So we all understand, for the buyers coming in that say, I have a price point of $500 or $1,000, can you recommend an artist for me that, and these are the specifications. And if I don't know your value, you're not on my list of people to, to say, to send this collector to. So, and what we want to do is build collectors for artists so that they can go to the next step. So we consider Avenue 50 kind of a starter gallery in a sense, but you have to be ready for a starter gallery.
Right. Not
just think, I'm a beginning artist, so now I'm going to go there. You have to be a little bit professionally ready.
I always talk about around pricing that the amount of work that you've done and that you have available for sale makes a difference in your pricing. I don't know about you, but I can always spot a newbie artist because their work is always overpriced, because number one, they think it's worth more than it is. Number two, it's very precious to them because they don't have a big body of work behind them. They don't have a lot of
art. Mm-hmm.
And when you don't have a lot of work behind you, it's hard to understand that, you can make some more. So
one time I was, with my partner, I said, I showed him a piece and he goes, oh yeah, that's good. Now do 100 more. And I'm going, I just want this one. I just want to do this one. But it's like on the website, on our website, we say, I want to see a body of work. I want to see at least 20 pieces, because if you're going to just show me one, that might be a one-hit wonder.
Yeah.
And beautiful, but I need to see a body of work that shows me that you're really serious about being an artist, you know, and also you want to show a body of work, because I might say, wow, where have you been? I want to show you. You speak exactly to my tastes. So.
Or even, when a collector looks at the work, they might say, I really like that, but it's not quite. And so where do you point them if there's nothing else?
Oh, that's true.
Well, what about this one? It's got more pink in it, or whatever it is that they're looking for.
Yeah, and so you just have so much space in your house.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have to start opening up a storage area to put that work in, because you're the only one who's enjoying it. It's up on all your walls, but
as a friend of mine who also got interviewed said, you don't want to be your own collector.
Like that.
Right? You're not doing this stuff to be your own collector.
Exactly. Now if you're afraid, well, I don't want to sell that, it's my best piece. Well, okay, then make smaller works, original. Don't give your collectors a print, because real collectors will not collect prints.
Right.
No giclées. And if anyone wants to come in the Avenue 50 and give me a giclée, it's like, I don't want a giclée.
Have you ever, do people ever ask you about giclées with painting on top of them? Is that acceptable?
Yes, if you alter the
Your
giclée and you
Okay.
give me different levels.
I would think so, but I wanted to ask what your opinion was.
Yeah, so one time we had a show and it was called Frida on Paper.
Uh-huh.
And there were a couple of artists that wanted to give me giclées of their work.
Mm-hmm.
I said, no, I'm not. We're not taking giclées. It's on paper. It's original art because true collectors do not want a giclée.
Right.
And she got all huffy and went home. And then the next day she came back and said, I painted on it. And it was beautiful. I said, we'll take it. We'll take it. You know, it was a really lovely piece, you know, so just work on it. In fact, that would be then multimedia, and it's more interesting.
Totally. I always make a case for people to even make photocopies of their work and paint on it over it, even if they're not going to do anything with the photocopy except explore what the possibilities are of that particular piece, you know,
Yeah.
new color ideas, new light, new
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah,
It's just an easy way to manipulate your work that you started with.
Yeah, I did that with a photograph I took of my tia in Cuba, and then I made a Xerox copy of it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then I took pastels
Mm-hmm.
and I painted her, and I loved it even more than the photograph. And I said, oh my God, it's only on a piece of typing paper here, you know.
Right.
But I put it behind a glass and a frame and hung it up, and I loved my portrait of my tia, you know.
Right, right. Okay, let me see if there's any people popping up with any questions here. And we're already at an hour, I just want to tell you. Okay, so there's not a lot of questions, but I just want to tell you that Chris Zambone is watching, and Georgia is telling, and Georgia Garside, who says
I know
that
Georgia. Georgia.
she knows you.
Hi, Georgia.
She says wonderful information, and so is Sandy Garcia. Do you know Sandy Garcia?
Maybe
She's artist out of Claremont.
Maybe by looks.
I bet if I showed you her work, you would know
Yeah.
it. Anyway, she also said wonderful information.
Oh, thank you.
This is all good stuff. Now, I know that you've got a business to run, so I don't want to, we're already at an hour. So, and see, you were
reluctant.
Time flies, right?
When you're having fun.
Yeah. Anyway, any message you want to give, because people will watch this and repeat later. So is there any message that you want to send before we sign off? Anything you want to tell people you want them to know about? It can be about you or about art or about collecting or about gallery ownership or anything.
We just would love people to support the arts in whatever way they could. Mm-hmm.
Good information right there. And Georgia says, hi, Kathy. All right, you guys. Have a beautiful afternoon. It's a gorgeous day, hopefully wherever you are. And we'll talk to you next week.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.